Yo, what's good? Happy Monday, everybody. Yeah, it's Monday. That's the day of the week that it is. And I've got some time. Got some time to work on the game, so we're going to do that. And I think we can make some decent progress today, because we kind of did a lot of the hard, or the sort of, not maybe even wasn't that hard, but the scarier stuff last time. We kind of broke the back of this refactoring that we're doing, this kind of redesigning of the circuitry logic here, of how these switches and doors, in the first instance, just getting the switches and doors working again with our new graph traversal logic in place. And so we're going to just start building this out into some of the other items now, get pressure plates going. I think I opened up all of the scenes that are involved in this. The switch and the door are done, and we have our E node now, which is kind of quite fundamental, so I might put that back here. Oh, that was saying BG platforms. I think that maybe was a bit of a graphical glitch. Anyway, so we got it working again the other day with this new E node. We've abandoned our old send and receive nodes, and we're in favor of one node that deals with both sending and receiving. And it's just a totally different design philosophy, I suppose. Rather than actually physically sending the power signal along the chain of connected items whenever a status changes, now what we're doing is whenever a status change occurs, the node that status is changing then searches the entire network and updates the whole thing. And so any node within the network can be responsible for updating the whole network, depending on whether it's moving or not, whether it's a moving piece or not. So hopefully this continues to work for us as we start to apply it to more complicated objects. I think it will. It was sort of designed with some of the more complicated sort of situations in mind. So optimistically speaking, today isn't going to be too tricky. It's just kind of work to do. We just have to take this new system and kind of take all our other objects that we built with the old system and kind of update them to work with the new system, basically. So the switch and the door are both working. They have set powered. They have a powered variable. They can update. Oh, that's the door. I think the door specifically has that, actually. Look, think about this. The E node, here we go. We've wrote these functions to add connections and remove connections, but we haven't used them yet. Our basic setup, where the kind of very fundamentals are working, is just pressing a button. Yeah, you can press it while you're jumping, not while you're hanging. Yeah, I think all that logic made sense. You can only interact with your hands when your hands are available. Yes, the door sort of works. So I guess we just work our way along some of the more complicated things. Probably the pressure plate. Maybe we'll order these. Pressure plate's probably the next thing because it's just a button. Held button equally. These two should be the next easiest ones to update. So you can see at the moment the pressure plate still has a eSend node. So we need to get rid of that and replace it with our new sort of generic E node. The held button's going to be in the same position. And then the socket gets even more complicated because it can send and receive. And the wire. I hope we don't really need to touch the wire sim or wire segment scenes. But we might do, because they were built quite specifically, and there's probably a lot of like just like redundant code in there now. Stuff that I wrote in that was needed to make the old system work but won't be needed now. And then probably the most complicated piece of all, at the very end of getting all these things working, will be to turn our attention back to the thing that made us realize our last attempt wasn't good enough. The water. So that's the kind of game plan for today, I think. So yeah, let's get on with it. So the pressure plates first. So I guess we want to create a test environment, but firstly, fundamentally, we want to delete the send node and give it just a normal E node instead. We then probably want to take switch 2 and delete it. And then we want to put a plate in next to door 2 here. We'll move the plate over to here. We will look at the platforms here and make room for the plate. And then we want to put a box into the room, which we should have a load of boxes anyway. So just pop that there. Then we want to connect these two to one another. So that will mean that the plate needs editable children. And the plate wants to be connected to the door, and the door wants to be connected to the plate. Save. And then coming into the script, we need a reference to the E node instead. And I guess we want to compare this to how the switch deals with it. But essentially, the logic we used was just to turn on and off based on that. So I think this should be quite quick. If we look at the switch here, so I guess it needs a set powered. Anything that's going to have a E node as a child, even if it doesn't do anything, because it's got an E node, it needs to have that function in there. And then it's just that. I don't think it needs to have the powering as an export variable, just as a variable. And then It's this, isn't it? We just want to set powering and then do that. So I think what we'd say is powering would equal true there. Don't know if we want to be calling this every single frame though, do we? Ideally not, right? Because then we're updating the network every single frame. So I think what we want to do is track whether it's changed. So if that is greater than 7 and powering is false, then do that, right? Elif, like the opposite of this. So if the plate piece position is less than or equal to 7 and powering is true, then we change it to false. And then we run this. In theory, this works now. It crashes now. Oh, yeah. So we changed this there, but we didn't change its name in its actual reference. Yeah, that works how it used to. It just works exactly the same as it used to, but just using the new logic. That's exactly what we want. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I think this is good. I think that's good news. That seems to work. I suppose just for fun, we'll take the plate. Let's tick metal only on it. And have some more fun. The player is good enough to hold down a metal one, but yeah, the only just. Yeah, cool. And then I guess just to prove a point, yeah. Okay. Right, tick. That's another thing done. That's the point, you know what I haven't looked at in a while. It's the Miro. So yes, we had to slightly adjust our plans here. Basic connections here, this is done now. This is green. So yeah, I moved a few stuff from January into February now. Upgrade all objects is what we're in the middle of today. And hopefully we finish that today. Maybe we finish the water today. Hopefully we at least finish this. And then we can get on with the other mechanics throughout the rest of this month, basically. Would be the plan. But yeah, that's plates done. So that's pretty good. The held button is next. So let's just delete that. Oops, sorry, excuse me. Let's get both of these boxes. Get them out of the way. Get our platforms back. And then let's bring in a held button. There it is. I'll put it there. And we will get rid of its eSend node. And give it a E node. And I'll do the script and update that reference on both sides. So I think this has got to be powering, hasn't it? In our new system. So powering. And then we do this. And so these are kind of like a one-way street. It just once you've held it for long enough, it'll do its thing. Oh, it just crashes though. Oh yeah, it's that same thing that we had with the plate, where anything that has an E node that doesn't actually change behavior when it's powered, which are normally these powering things, they just need to have that blank function in there. I mean, something's not going right. Not sure what. Yeah, I wonder what we're missing here then. I would have thought this would just work. Is it because we haven't set this integer? I bet that's what it is. In our actual held button in the level, the whole time set to 0. So if we set that to 5, and it might be worth, it makes a lot of sense to give that a default value. Actually, it's kind of silly that we didn't. So we'll make the default be 5 there anyway. Yeah, okay, and now it works. We can hold it down 5 seconds. When we stop, we start losing progress again. And if we hold it for the whole 5 seconds, eventually, boop, it's done. It still didn't open the door though. Oh, but that's because we haven't connected it to the door. So door 2, I think, is its... I think we need editable children. This one is connected to that. And this one is connected to that. Is that right? That guy's got a node. That guy's got a node. I think this will work. Perfect. And then it does nothing after that. It's a one-way street, but that was as far as we got with held buttons. It was just a basic placeholder for this functionality. If we come to actually building specific, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like valves or things that the player will have to hold an interaction with, I presume we'll build those specifically for that scenario. But what this is just a fundamental kind of base class, if you like, for what a held interaction looks like. So that works. So that's another one ticked off the list. Plate done, held done. So if they're all this easy, great. I get the feeling sockets and wires maybe it'll take a little bit longer, but hopefully not too much longer. And then when we get to the water, that's where the real moment of truth comes in. So yes, so we shall see. Right. So give me 2 seconds, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Okie dokie.
I'll listen out for Eva.
Right, sorry, on with the show. Okay, so that's the plate and the hell button done, and this is proving to be such a simpler system. It's so much more lightweight, I suppose, in terms of the logic, which is what we want. But the socket's going to get more rowdy. This isn't going to be as easy. So, let's create our test environment first. We have a kind of decent one over here, except, yeah, it's not really what we want. So we'll come back to that area when we start testing water. For now, what we really want is, we do want a button. Oh, what did I just do? Oh, this background tiles. Okay, no, we don't need to do anything with you. Can I just be normal? Thank you. We don't actually want a held button though. And delete that. And we'll just get a normal switch back. I'll put that by door 2. I'll put socket 2 up here by socket 1 there, because actually this is all that first area, and then this is our little second area here. So an editable children on this switch. And then we're going to want 2 sockets, but let's move this switch into place first. There it is. And we'll just put it there, that's fine, I guess. And then we'll want to have a couple of sockets. Oh no, I don't, oh no. Yeah, socket 4 and socket 3, that's fine. We'll put those there. Yeah, that's good. And then let's move them to where they want to be. So like that. And socket 4 there or something like that. There's a chance that oh, bear with me 2 seconds. Right. No, I actually think I've probably built this all a bit. This is all a bit spread out too much. But what we could do is we could just put this there. It doesn't. I mean, none of the positionings of these things matter very much. But oh, whoops. I mean, when I was moving that around, I hope I was moving the whole socket. I think so, because the children aren't editable yet, so that was probably working fine. And then last thing we want is a wire, another wire, which is like this. And we'll pop it over. Actually, I guess it can stay down there. It doesn't really matter where it is. But what we do want to do is move it in the world. To be something like that. Let's just run this. Yeah, that looks good. This is the kind of environment we want to be in. Yep, and picking these up and plugging them in still works. Okay, good. So editable children on both of these sockets. Now, switch 2 E node needs to be connected to socket 3. Ah, right, but these sockets, yes, okay. So these sockets need amending. So we're going to delete both their send and receive nodes. And we're going to just add the normal E node in instead up here. And save. And then so when we come in here, we should see those sockets have changed, as indeed they have. And now we can say, okay, well, the switch is connected to the socket and the socket is connected to the switch. We'll come up with the proper sort of development tools that mean we don't have to manually do both of those both ways every time. But for now, it's fine. This light is too bright. Oh, what am I doing? That is better in it, and then like so. Yeah, that's much more pleasant. Right. So that's those two connected. Then socket 4 is connected to the door, and the door is connected to socket 4. Okay. So the first thing, I suppose, is getting our head around this distinction between powered and powering. Oops. So yeah, there's going to be lots of errors in this script for a moment. When I just look at the switch here, we have powering. And then powered is like a variable that we probably should have, but don't. And now I wonder if all of these things should inherit some other class, maybe. That could be quite a tidy way of doing it in the long run. Huh. But I don't think a socket is ever powering. I mean, unless it is, unless when a socket is switched on, it becomes that. But I almost think it's like a socket just should really behave like a wire. It's never creating the power, it's just attached to something that is. I think we'll create problems if the sockets themselves are actually able to create the power. Because then it's almost like they run in two modes. There'll be the mode where they're connected to a switch or something else that's powering them or not. I see the socket as being something that just passes power through. But maybe it will be much quicker from a development point of view if we can just say, look, this particular socket is just always switched on. Because there will be scenarios when we'll want that. I need to go get a jumper. Give me a second. Right, okay. So I don't know, I mean, in a way it might be useful. Did I have that already as a... So we do have this like powered as an export variable. I don't think powered ever should be an export variable. It is on the door. Ooh. Yeah, interesting to think about this. I mean, the easiest way, because we already have it, is the switch. And the switch you can just tick Ah, yes, the switch does have an export variable for powering. And when we switch it, we actually change that value. So it can default to something. Yeah. So I would say that we'll make the socket, if you wanted a socket that was always powered, you connect it to a switch that's always on instead. I think. Yeah, I think so. I think I'm kind of getting my head around this a little bit. With the plate, we said we'd never want that as an export variable. You never want to be able to set the default on the plate. I think that's true. And on the switch you do. It's just, do we want to just make at the tick of a box a particular circuit just always powering, or a particular socket always powering? I think we're going to have to change a lot of this logic. And the wire pin indexes and things like this. All of this logic in the wires is going to have to change. So we're kind of dealing with the socket and the wire together, really, because they do go hand in hand. So I mean, the wire can lose both of those and gain a normal E node. And we know we want to simplify that. Just gives us loads of errors. That's fine. So I've got this thing on the back of my neck. I need to leave it alone. Right. I mean, in a way, it might be easier to start some of these scripts nearly from scratch. So I'm trying to work out what all of these functions do, but then they're like kind of in a different world to how we want it to all work now. I mean, if we just take the switch as a basic example, all it does is set powering on the E node, right? So from the socket's point of view, It has its connections. But I guess it needs to know well, it will change anyway because so it needs this set powered function. None of the others, like, I actually deleted everything we weren't using. I didn't leave any old crap in. No. So when something changes it to being powered or not, so it'd say powered equals state, and then we'd update the color based on that. And if we look at the door, we do the things that it needs to do when its state changes. An update is like about how it tells the water simulation whether there are things to collide with there or not. When it comes to the socket, it needs to update this variable and it needs to change what color it looks like. And I think that's it. So I actually think that's it for the set powered function. Yeah. And that, I think, is in place of turn on, turn off. Yes, there's still quite like a web of different things to unpick here that I've built. How things are plugged in and unplugged we need to look at. But in theory, I guess it'll just crash. Yeah, it'll just crash because too much random shit that doesn't make sense yet. Oh, and it'll be all the other wires that are plugged in that will be crashing it because we've got like these ones over here that aren't set up properly anymore. In fact, to that end, because this is going to get more complicated and I want to be able to test things in isolation, I think we do need to delete these two wires. Delete those for objects and be left with just the ones that we're working on. Still crashes, still plugin is still being called for some reason. On the wire, plugin is being called. Not sure Y. And what we're going to be using are our new add connection and remove connection functions here, instead of any of the other systems that I had built. So maybe we just need to start deleting stuff, to be honest, because I do think a lot of this needs rewriting from scratch. Like, if powered, change those colors, and if plugged in is nothing, then you're plugged in, or else you're not. Okay, fine. I don't actually think we need to change the color of the hole anymore at all, because we have the wires to plug in and out anyway. So I don't think we need that. Similarly here, and therefore I don't think the hole actually needs to be involved in the script at all. I think the black square shows when we look at a socket. You can see it's there. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't look as much like a socket, but that's all it is now. It's just a visual thing. The white, turning it white when we plug things in and out, was more like a debug thing before I actually had wires animating and moving around. Get wire pin index. I think if we do ever use any logic similar to that, we're going to be using a lot of very different logic, so I think it doesn't matter. I think we get rid. One question I do have is, like, does the wire actually have two E nodes? One for each end of the wire. Is that at all necessary? Or does, like, one end of the wire just look after connection A and the other one looks after connection B, and we consider the whole wire to be one point on our graph? Because you do kind of want to know which side is which, but we have connection A and B, so we kind of have that. So yeah, I don't wonder about that. Does it crash now? That is still being called. On the wire, plugin is being called by something. When we come in here and we look at neither of them have anything assigned to plugged in, which does sort of suggest, yeah, that wouldn't be called there. Focus on and off we can definitely leave. I think this is probably called by the player. There's a lot of wire-based functions here. You know, we don't need to keep track of plugged in, do we? Maybe that's like a bool now rather than a node. I guess we want to be able to tell it what is plugged into it so that that thing can be snapped to it. The wire needs to be like initialized, so to speak. It's quite hard to work with this because like it would be easier to just delete everything. I think I might do that. We're going to delete those. We know we want to keep focus on and off. Set powered, that makes sense. We've worked that one out. And then I think the start thing, we're also going to just delete it all. And we're going to just pop this stuff into there because I think it actually makes more sense for it to be done on start rather than the ready. Start is basically a function we're using for when the whole like scene tree is ready, not just this particular object. Okay. So this has almost none of the functionality we want anymore, but at least it doesn't have like erroneous, like crazy stuff that we don't need. In fact, before we finish up with the socket, aren't there any, like this plugged in variable we just don't need anymore until we're probably going to put something new in. Light we do use, enode we use. Do we ever do anything with the sprite? We modulate this color of the sprite? Okay, fine. But like the enode is like way more important. Let's put that at the bottom. It's slightly separated from those. So other things in the network are going to set it to being powered or not. It's never going to be creating the power. It's never going to be powering. But something that isn't powering, like a door. Did we have powering on that? No, we didn't need it. Okay, cool. Okay, so I think we're kind of done with the socket for now. We've sort of stripped it back to stuff. All the stuff that's there, we do want to keep. I guess there's not a lot we can do. So turn on and turn off. We can change these, right? Because this is this. It's set powered. We don't need turn on and turn off anymore. We have set powered for this. So we set the power to state, and then I don't think we need to do that either here, do we? Because if it is being set to powered, then the whole network is. So anything that calls set powered on this will have already found the whole network. Found something that means they should be powered and then powered them. So to that end, we just replace changing light.color to doing that on the wire instead. I think we can get rid of those and call that good. Right. As for a lot of these functions, I'm very tempted to just delete them all, to be honest, on this wire. Start again. linking up the functionality we have on the player's end with these cables. We kind of have to start again, I think, because it's all the logic's going to be so different, I hope. That was the point. But I guess this is going to involve wire sim and maybe even the segment more than I thought. Probably not the segment so much. The wire sim handles those. But the wire sim has pin A and pin B. And these things we're going to want to keep because they relate to the physics. But pin A will be the thing responsible for connection A, and pin B will be responsible for connection B, because the wire itself will have this E node with these two connections. So that makes sense. That's kind of like easy to get your head around. Wire sim set pin. Yeah, I think there's definitely stuff in wire sim we're going to need to look at. And wire pin, I suppose. It's probably all three of those, yeah, are going to require some looking at. We're sort of going to have to do them slightly all at once, really, because we're not building up from scratch anymore. We have all this stuff like there, unless I delete it all and then we do build it up from scratch, and that might be easiest. But things like manage water entry and exit on the pin on the wires are probably going to want to keep in the long run. So yeah, let me shut my door. Okay. Yeah, it's just messy. That's why we had to redo it, because this is just a web of mess that I've made here. I think I'm happy with the socket script for now. It doesn't have anywhere near the amount of functionality that we want it to have in the long run. But everything that is in that script we want to keep, which is more than can be said for all the rest of this stuff, which we probably do in a kind of build from the ground up a little bit. But I mean, a lot of this stuff we are going to want to keep. So it's like, it's the stuff around these pins. I mean, actually, I suppose all the stuff in this pin script is fine. I think this is wrong. like the logic around the water stuff is probably needs readdressing, but actually most of that's fine probably. This one, yeah, I guess that's fine for debugging purposes, right? So set pin means that you set its position. So I'd probably rather call this function set pin position rather than set pin. And this all links to the pins. I think attach pin and detach pin and set pin position are all probably keepers. And then in the fifth, okay, and we're nearly at the end of pin sim here. Okay, what's start got in it? So they all start frozen and then we unfreeze them when the game's ready to kind of process things. So that's fine. I think all of this stuff this is just about checking whether the player should drop it or not. And there's a flex over there. So actually, I think all that can stay too. I don't think there's anything. I think those two are fine. I think it's just going to be here in this script where we have unplug, plug in, update held position. I wonder if we run the thing now. It still has references to these nodes that it doesn't have. And for some reason, I still don't understand why plugin is being called like immediately when we run the game. There's obviously something doing that, but what that is, I don't know. Okay. There's just a lot of messy logic here. That we can keep. I understand that, and the player's just probably calling that whenever they're holding one of the cables. Now, player held is just keeping track of whether the player's holding pin index 0 or 1, 0 being A and 1 being B. I think we can keep this. If it starts unplugged, we just want it to go. We do that when the whole wire is ready, so that's fine. Update held position, this is fine. It's just all this stuff that isn't relevant anymore because we don't use eSend nodes anymore, and so we don't have set target. All this kind of stuff. The question is it easier to rewrite these from scratch, or do we want to piggyback off of this logic I do have here? I do think at the moment we might as well make the wire just have the one node. It's got connection A and B. That is what a wire has. That makes sense. It's got pin A and it's got pin B, and those relate to one another. I think that all is really logical. Except power design. So I think we've boiled it down to just these two functions that need either rewriting or just deleting. And then obviously the socket will probably need some functions as well added for like accepting the cables kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. So I think the best way to think about this is to go back to the player script here and just better understand what's happening. So the sockets are an interaction type of socket. So use socket will be called by the state that the player's in when they do so. At the moment the sockets don't have a plugged in variable because I deleted it, but I do think we need to know if there's something plugged into that socket or not. The socket needs to be able to just say, hey look, I've got something in me or I haven't, and that's not actually to do with the logic of passing the electricity around, it's just to do with the logic of what interaction the player has with that socket. So by default I guess they're set to false. So if the socket plugged in does not equal null, now that we're doing this as a bool, we can just say if socket's plugged in, if the player's not holding a wire, then the wire becomes the thing that's plugged into the socket, which we don't necessarily need anymore. What we want to do is actually make that connection. Now wire debug mode I'm going to just get rid of because we don't need it anymore, because it was only there for when we wanted the player to have infinite wires just coming out of their arms at all times, because I was just testing it. Now we've got wires on the floor. We just don't need wire debug mode anymore, where we just generate a new wire every time we try to plug something in. So therefore this just becomes a big old pass. If the socket is not got a cable in it and the player's not holding a cable, when you interact with that socket, just nothing happens. If the player is holding a cable, then they plug it in and then they're not holding a cable anymore. The complicated logic is here, but that shortened this a lot and got our head around it a bit more. What did I just delete something from there? What is going on? Why do I have a space there? I never normally have spaces like that. Yeah, okay, so that can stay. That's fine. That works with everything we've kept as well. With the unstable stuff and updating the held position by feeding it position. All that stuff's good. Close that. Don't need to work on that. I don't think we need to work on this either. We get the wire simulation. We detach the pin on the end of the wire that the player's holding. And then we either throw it or just let it fall. So I think that one we don't need to look at either. Pick up wire. If you're already carrying a wire, then drop it and then pick it up. What I find interesting is we don't use it here. So If the socket's got a wire in it, but you're not holding one, then you just pick it up, right? Otherwise, you swap them. And I guess that is different to picking up a wire and deciding whether we swap if you've got one or not, because you're swapping it into the socket, aren't you? Okay. Are we getting any crashes now? We probably still have lines I haven't edited. Yep, of course, these ones, yeah. So yes, the unplug and plug in functions on the socket don't exist anymore. Similarly, the cable has unplug and plug in functions too. And that's what all the errors are. I don't quite want to just delete the whole lot though, because I do think a lot of it will be reusable. I'm slightly regretting deleting what I had in the socket for those two functions, but I think it just passed it through. I don't think they did very much, but say, you know, pass myself into the plug-in on the cable that I'm plugging in, kind of thing. This is a bit of a nightmare though. I didn't think it would be, quite as messy as this, but that's life. Maybe this function isn't being called. Does it just return an error if it's just got variables it can't make sense of anyway? And it's that one there, because that's actually just doesn't exist in this script. It just doesn't need to execute the function to realize that it's going to be fucked. Okay, I think we're gonna do it, because this, I just need to start again so that I can build it up. This has all got too many layers of logic that don't apply. Whereas what I want to do is start with very basic scenarios and then build them up from there. So just do that and just get something running again and see what happens. Right. I think for now, just comment all of that out. Why is set pin? I thought we had set pin. Oh, it's called set pin position now, because that is definitely clearer. So yes, wherever we were setting pin, we'll set pin position instead. So we can still pick them up and carry them around and drop them as well if the tension gets too great, which is cool. Oh yeah, I think they need to be slightly... There we go. And then it crashes when you try and plug it in because there's no plug-in function on the socket anymore. So the thing in the interactions list is the pin, right? Yes, because interactions list 0 has the pin index, so that's the pin. That's when we set the actual wire and we attach that pin, so it's no longer a physics object anymore. It's kind of locked into the static body. Yeah, if we say attach pin, we freeze it and we make it, yeah, exactly. So picking up a wire never forces anything to update because no circuit changes when you pick up a wire. You just pick it up. But it's when we use a socket that things will change and things will need to happen. So socket is the thing on interactions list in that 0 position. And if the socket's plugged in and the wire is null, then we're going to be unplugging and picking up that thing. So maybe this should be a node. But you don't want to keep track of which wire necessarily. We want to actually keep track of the pin that it's plugged into it. It would be much more useful. So I guess we go back to that being a node 2D. But we want it to be the pin of the wire. Or we want to store the pin index with it. So like call that plugged in wire and have another one called like plugged in index or something like that. Plugged in pin. I don't know. Not convinced about that. I think it can just be a bool though, because what we should do is we should lean into the system that we've built, which are these connections, and we should use add connection and remove connection every time. And that is going to be what dictates where these connections are made, right? So I think so. I guess we could also, what we should do probably is set a precedent so that a socket's connection A is always the socket and connection B is the behind the scenes one, like what it's connected to that the player can't control. But the thing that the player's plugging in and unplugging is always using connection A. On the sockets side at least, because then here we can just say, well, it's socket E node connection A. That will be the E node of the wire. So then get parent would be the wire. Right? You want to know which end of the wire you're holding, A or B. The socket no longer has a get wire pin index function. I guess what you want to do is you want to look at the wire and ask it, is it in pin A or pin B that you are connected to the E node of the socket? Because the E node of the socket will be in one of these two spots on the wire in that moment, and we want to know which one. But maybe it does make sense for this to be a function on the socket like we had it set up for originally, because then we can, call it from other places. So what the socket wants to be able to do is say, it's E node connection A that is the E node of the wire that's plugged in. So that E node itself has two connections. And you want to say if the connection A of connection A equals E node, your own E node, then return 0 because we've found it at connection A. Else return 1. Now we're only going to call getWirePinIndex on a socket that has a cable in it currently, because we call it there and there when socket is plugged in. So I think that will work. And then we can set which one the player's holding. This is the part that it doesn't work yet, and that should work. So yeah, we've got the unplugging to worry about now. Stretch. I'm just going to take a quick break to go to the loo, and then we'll be back. I'll play some tunes in the meantime. So yeah, catch you in a mo. Yo. Okay, there we go. That was my needle scratch attempt at a needle scratch sound effect. Yeah, cool. Let's keep going. So, yeah, hopefully we can get these wires working with this new sort of system now. We're kind of edging ever closer. So, where are we at with this then? We are... I think kind of done here, except for this unplug function, right? We set the wire to be the one the player's holding. And we know which hand the player's... Oh, sorry, which end of the wire the player's holding. So really this unplug function on the socket just... I just want to tell the socket that it doesn't have the thing plugged into it anymore. But the wire then also had these unplug and plug in functions. We should probably start here. At the moment, does it crash when we pick up the wire? It doesn't, does it? It crashes when we try and plug it in. No doubt, because that doesn't exist. So swapping wire is the one we're already holding. This just gets copied. We can get the pin index, unplugs the same. Funny that we're swapping them in different orders down here. Yes, I think if we get this working and this working, everything else follows. The wire does have these plug-in and unplug functions, which we just deleted as well. So I guess there's stuff to probably fill in there as well. But yeah. C'est la vie. So yeah, let's start with this. So we'll give the sockets their plug in and unplug functions back. Whoops. Where's redo? Or whatever, I'm pretty sure that was all I'd done. But when we look at how the player calls the plug in and unplug on these things, wire and false. Unplug has nothing. Player holding is an index. We tell it what we're plugging in, but what does this false mean? Why did we have a bool there? I have to go into Git and look at the old version of the project, I think. I think the player holding thing there might have been a I mean, it transfers through, so it is the same as the player holding where we receive in there. It passes it through to the wire. So let me look at the old version of that wire script then. So it was all used as some sort of logic about what end of the cable the player was holding. So I think we probably do want to pass that in when we plug something in. But it shouldn't be a bool. So I think for now we'll just assume that when we plug in, actually all we need to do is pass the wire. We do want the player to know which end of the wire they're holding, I suppose. Right. So this is going to be where the magic happens, really. As we plug in, we don't want player holding anymore. On the wire, I'm going to get rid of that too and assume we don't need it for now. What we do want is to make that connection between these two objects. Okay, it's still behaving as we'd expect. Oh, we have a floating box in that water now. Where did that come from? Was that always there? I didn't know I had it in this part of the map. A box. We don't. How did the box get there? What? What? Oh, there's a box there. Okay, somehow some box got caught underneath the ground there. Well, we'll put it somewhere a little bit more logical at least. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff we could fiddle around with the physics there, but... Ah, yeah, look, it kind of just locked it in. Interesting. Right, so I do regret deleting the old ones now, but I've got them on the other monitor here. I've got all the functions I deleted from the last commit I do have on the other monitor next to me now, so it's not too bad to look through, and it's kind of easier to digest what I'm doing now that these aren't like just filled with stuff that isn't really working or like part of our new system. So, but we kind of do have to convert the logic, I guess. So what it seems like the socket script does when we run unplug or plug in, it did like this. We don't have that anymore. And we set plugged in to the wire, which at the moment isn't how we're doing it. What we're doing is having a bool there instead, so we'd set that to true. And on the socket, what it's actually receiving is the wire. Not socket there, because I copied that over from the other thing. And unplug, it would do this. And plugged in would just be false instead of null. So basically, all the passing that signal through the socket does is just let the socket keep track of whether it is plugged in or not. But essentially, otherwise, all it does is pass the responsibility onto the wire to actually do all the talking, which seems to make sense. But I might add something here, which is about making the connections. The only thing is that I already did handle the logic of adding connections here. When you add a connection to something, it automatically does the connection on the other side. So I would say, let's keep the socket just passing it on through, as it has done. And when we unplug here, next we send the socket in there too. Yeah, let's make the wire be responsible for it and just have the socket script be quite simple and just pass the signal through to the wire. I mean, it's a bit messy because really it doesn't need to come via here. The player could just call this on the actual wire maybe. But whatever, it's fine. It's like any of these things work as long as we understand it. So now the wire gets told, hey, look, I'm plugging you into here. So at this point, we need to use our add connection. And so if we look at what the wire script looked like before with these, we know that the socket will always use connection A because we've made that rule. So this is actually, we just need to rewrite this from scratch because I'm looking at the old logic I used. It uses so much stuff that we don't use anymore. And like is send, I'm not sure we're going to need this anymore. Because we're actually setting that as we plug stuff in and out. I think we can just delete that variable. It's not needed anymore. A wire doesn't have like, the pin doesn't have like, am I sending or am I receiving anymore? The pins are just two ends of one object that passes electricity around, you know? So yeah, looking at the old code for rewriting these doesn't actually feel particularly useful. I think we just got to think about what we're doing now and make it work. So I think we want to keep that. There's this line of code here when we plug something in. Where we want to set the pin, the one that the player's holding, in there. So when the player picks up a wire, oh look, the wire will know what player held is already. We are doing that. That's still there. So yeah, I think this will work. And that's different to the player holding variable that we had before. So just on a very fundamental level now, it should plug in. It should like move to the right spot. No, it doesn't. Oh, that's because I think I was also looking at the end of that. Okay, it crashes. Oh yeah, I know why. Because it's called set pin position now. Not set pin. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that does work. And now we can't unplug it because we don't have an unplug function yet. Actually, it seemed to crash for a different reason, but I'm going to pretend I didn't see that for now. So we set it to where it needs to be visually. That's cool. We want to say that the E node must add a connection right, hold on a second. These are two separate variables, but then we're not storing them like that on an ongoing basis. We're storing them as just an array. So that could be a problem because we're going to want to know which side is which. Like which connection it's in. So where did I do that logic before? I need to think about that again. It would have been... Well, I guess it would have been in socket then. Here. So we need to... oh, damn. Yeah, okay. So we need to rethink how this works. So not two set... Unless we just keep them as two separate things. But it's going to bring us back to looking at this because we have it set up as like a little array that we scroll through. Unless we keep all this as it is and we just have another way of the socket knowing which is which, but that feels messier, potentially. But we'll probably have to update quite a lot of this. To go the other way with it. Yeah, I might have to give this a bit more thought. I'm just feeling like I'm not going to get this done now before I have to go get the kids. That is something I'd forgotten about the way I'd set this up. Easiest thing might be to rethink this array and just instead rewrite my code to just check the two connections and just build a system that is limited to everything having two connections. Because then the one exception to that will be water, which will allow us to split signals and stuff, and that makes sense from a gameplay point of view, mechanics point of view, of like it gives the playing with electricity with water at a point. Whereas if we had like little splitter boxes that you could just plug into without using water, it kind of calls into question, like, do you need the water at all? So I wonder if it would be like add connections, node, and index. Or something. It does get more complicated though than having two fixed slots. Having to look at which one's empty, which one's full. Things like that. Yeah, this is the thinker. This is one that needs a decision making on that I hadn't foreseen. Because this is so simple. If they're just in an array, you're just adding and removing to them. Yeah, maybe we don't want to fuck with any of this stuff because it's all about these arrays being sort of messed about with. But I think this wouldn't work then. I'm trying to get my head around this now. What does that mean when I read that? If the E node of the socket, if its connection A has its own connection A, which is in turn the E node of the socket, then we know that connection A is the one that's plugged into it. Yeah, shit. This is a stumbler. I think it's easily navigatable, but this is a unforeseen factor now that I need to think about. This is a function that's only used when something is plugged into the socket. But we're not actually referring to connection A or B ever. Apart from when each E node is ready, it makes its array of connections from those two. So these are basically, they're only here as a developer tool, like for us to connect things up before the level is loaded. So when the level loads, certain connections are already in place for the player. So it's almost arbitrary. You know, you could have like 10 of these and then just duplicate this, and then it would all, like, everything could have up to 10 connections. So I think that's more scalable, and that we should keep that. And what we should do is make the socket just have some logic itself where it can work this stuff out without relying on these. I think that's the safest way of doing it. but then the wire does need to kind of know which end is which. And we call them pin A and pin B for good reason. So a wire does have a limit. It will be connected to exactly two things, no more, no less. And I think most things will be two. So that brings me back around to thinking that maybe I should just rewrite this so that it is a system that only deals with two connections every time. Because that kind of is the scope of what I'm trying to build. It's 3 o'clock. Yeah, I think this one's a bit of a thinker for a while. So I think we'll probably call it a day for the stream for now. But I'm going to keep playing with it. And I might stream a bit more this evening. We'll see. But certainly, yeah, this requires a bit more thought, I think. I'm happy that this script is pretty done. It's this bit. This needs a rethink. But this pertains to when we unplug things. That's when the socket already has something plugged into it. That's when we need to use this. So when we plug in, we know that the wire's being plugged in. We know that the player knows which end of that wire they're holding because we have... Oh, the wire knows what end the player's holding. So when we plug in, the socket could just store which end of the cable it is that's plugged into it. Equally, I suppose the cable could store that. And I guess when a wire starts plugged in, like, is it in the... socket or switch? So switch has a start function. But that just changes its power now. So yeah, this could just be stored. Like when we plug in, like the first thing we could just do is just say, like grab that. What side of the cable is the player holding? Because that's the side that's now plugged in. So then we'd say like plugged pin index equals 0 or something. By default, it doesn't really matter. Whenever plugged in is false, this will be irrelevant anyway, and it defaults to false. So let's put it down here, I suppose. I'll just say plug pin index equals wire dot player held. Except that the wire might update that stuff immediately. So I think we might want to swap these around. Because the socket can deal with its own variables. And then like action the stuff on the wire afterwards. That makes some sense. When something gets unplugged, we don't need to worry about updating that index. We just say that it's not plugged in anymore, and that variable won't ever be looked at. But plug pin index now exists, and we don't need this function. And then we just come back into the player function here where we would call that, and it's now just a variable that's called something better than that. It's called that whole thing. So if there's something plugged into the socket and you're not holding a wire, then whatever the socket had plugged into it now becomes the player held one. That makes sense. And then you unplug it. So I can just put that there and get rid of a line. Oops. Similarly down here, in these two spots where we use wire pin index, let's just pop it straight in and save. And then I guess if there are any other places where we call on that function, we will find out. Ah. Problematic. Yeah, that doesn't work anymore. Because we need to be able to ask the socket which wire is plugged into it. But it's not going to be in parent A like that. Or connection A, rather. It's going to just be one of the items in the connections array. So maybe we do go back to plugged in actually not being a bool anymore and being the actual item. You know, this could just be null and then it becomes wire and then it becomes null again, like that. And then the player does not equal null, and that means there's a cable plugged in. But if you're not holding a cable, why is socket not plugged in? That is how we had it before. Feels good to me. So now we know which wire is plugged in, we know which end of it's plugged in, and we can pick it up and put it back down again. Okay, doesn't like the swapping. Haha. It doesn't do anything, but at least it doesn't crash anymore. And things can be plugged in. But you see the error there. I grabbed the wrong side. So yeah, this is the exact thing we're trying to solve now. We can see where the stumbling's coming in, that we don't really know which end of the cable we're grabbing. But that's because I mean, we have no logic for the unplugging of the wire at all. I think we're probably getting quite close now, though, aren't we? We just need to add the connections. The pins still have this plugged in variable. Not plugged in. I think we will need that. And that's one of the main things we do in the old version of this plug-in function here. So we set its position, we need to make the connection, and then we need to tell the pin that it's plugged in. So the wire knows what one the player's holding when we plug it in, which means I think we can copy some of this. We want to do just that part. If the player's holding 0, then it's pin A that's now plugged in. Or else it's pin B. And we want to add both the socket and the wire to the list of connections. So what we do is we say that the E node of the wire will add a connection. And that connection will be the socket's E node. And then by running that function, it will do it both ways and then update the network. Okay. Or when we unplug, when the socket calls unplug, it sets plugged into nil, but it still has its last plugged pin index there. So when we come to unplug a wire, we do know which end of the wire it is. Yeah, and we just detach it, because if the player's then picking it back up again, that's handled in the logic in here, isn't it? Where we swap, we unplug, and then we plug in. So we've got to detach the pin that's plugged into the socket, which would be socket dot plugged pin index. And then if that's 0, then it's that one that gets unplugged, otherwise it's that one. And then we want to do this sort of remove connection thing, which should handle all of the logic that was. I mean, these functions used to be enormous, but now this add connection just does it. And I think remove connection should too. So if we look at the E node, we look at remove connection, we only need to feed it the node as well that we want to remove. We update both the networks. I mean, I'm almost certain this isn't going to work out the box, because that would be wild if it did, but equally, maybe it will. Okay, kind of does work. Okay, and those... Oh, there we go. See, there's a bug. It doesn't want to connect to that anymore. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's probably close enough that I'm going to get today. I think I need to come back to this at another time. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the old logic still just works, so that's really good to see. Wow, so how did I get that bug a minute ago then? I wonder what I did. That was so wrong. Seems like it's kind of working now, doesn't it, really? I'm sure there are bugs. and we'll find them and fix them. But for now, it's like a kind of the fundamental swapping over of things to sockets and wires seems to be kind of there. So I'm gonna call it now, a little bit later than I thought I would. I need to rush, but that was good. That was progress. So thanks one and all for watching, as always, and more to come. So big up yourselves and catch you soon. All right, boom, peace.